welcome to our live event with Polish journalists Agnieszka Wieniawska and Michał Kokot. And thanks you very much for joining. Before introducing and thank you our guests for today's conversation, we'd like to very warmly thank Voxeurop subscribers and shareholders for their support, because it enables us to keep hosting such events, keep translating and publishing quality journalism throughout investigations, great cartoons, and last but not least, stay independent. So I am Catherine André, based in Paris, and I'm editorial director of Voxeurop.
Hello, I'm Gian-Paolo, the editor-in-chief of Voxeurop, currently in Brussels. So, on 1st June, Poland elected Nationalist Karol Nawrocki, independent, but backed by the hard-right populist Law and Justice Party, as its president. Nawrocki narrowly edged out liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski. The new head of state, who will enter into office on 6 August, is an admirer of Donald Trump, wants border controls with Germany, he wants to stop migrants, he speaks ill of his country's million Ukrainian refugees, he's opposed to their country joining NATO, and he's supported in this by the EU-sceptic Hungarian leader Viktor Orbán. I have to remember that this event is organized in collaboration with Pulse Project, a European initiative to promote cross-border journalistic cooperation.
So now let's introduce our guest. Agnieszka, you're a journalist and the publisher of the online newspaper Krytyka Polityczna. You will correct the pronunciation. You've authored several books on the solidarity movement and Polish cinema. And Michał Kokot, you're a journalist at the foreign desk of the daily newspapers Gazeta Wyborcza, our Polish partner in the Pulse European Media Project or network. You're, among others, the author of a much praised investigation on the role of the spy tool Pegasus in Poland's politics. You're both regular contributors to Voxeurop throughout various European collaborative projects. So we'll start right away with our first question. The narrow victory of Nationalist Karol Nawrocki testifies to the ongoing polarization of Polish society. Could you explain to us what led to it, whether it was an old thing or whether it was more recent development? Actually, the question is for both of you, so whoever wants to start. Do you want to start, Agnieszka?
I can start. Thank you for invitation, Voxeurop. Thank you. It's a pleasure for Krytyka Polityczna to be the partner with you with many projects and to cooperate for many years. The polarization in Poland, I think, started in 2005. I don't know if Michał will agree with me. It was the parliamentary election when Law and Justice and the Civic Platform, the 2 biggest political parties, which now they just took over almost all political scene in Poland. In 2005, when they went to election, they even thought about cooperation. They thought about building the coalition. It was 20 years ago, and some young people cannot believe that when I tell them this story. But just even at the last moment of the campaign, I think, and especially after election, they realized, both the Civic Platform and Law and Justice, that when they fight each other, they grow. It's like Pepsi and Cola. They took over whole political scene. They stopped thinking about building coalition, and they started, to fight each other, and it helped them to both of this political party to grow up. And this is how it started. And right now, these are 2 biggest political parties. That's why in the last till then, in the presidential election, in the second round of presidential election, each time we had the candidate from Civic Platform and candidate from Law and Justice, or supported by Law and Justice. These are, and the same happened right now. And this is something we can see not only in Poland, when this polarization is growing, and also this polarization is stacking in this moment of 50 and 50%. This is in this presidential election, Karol Nawrocki, he won with he had more 400,000 votes, more than Trzaskowski, something like that. So it's like teeny tiny difference. If you remember the Brexit referendum, the similar situation. So if we very often we can see this situation. So this is the moment when we are now in Poland.
Okay, thank you. And Michał?
Hello, thank you for inviting me. Should I say where I'm now, or should I write? Yeah, okay. I'm in Poland. I'm in Wrocław. I'm not based in Warsaw now. It's southwestern of Poland. Basically, what said Agnieszka is everything true. I will just add maybe to it that after the fall of communism, the political landscape was divided between the communists and the Solidarność movement politicians, post-Solidarność movement politicians movement. I would say what Kaczynski did after 2005 was to unite the camp of the conservative right, which was unique in his attempt because nobody else before him was able to do it for so long. There were some attempts also to create some additional conservative camps, but only Kaczynski succeeded to that extent. What we saw after 2005 was a division between, let's make it maybe simple, between a conservative camp and a liberal one, or left liberal one, if you like. Donald Tusk comes from Gdańsk, which is a historically liberal city, while Kaczynski comes from the conservative part of Warsaw, and he led this camp. He's leading this camp until this day, actually. The voters of Nawrocki and Trzaskowski are also different ones, and Poland is exactly, as Agnieszka mentioned, divided into two parts. One of them is a conservative one, whereas the voters of Nawrocki lives in smaller cities, rural areas, are mainly not that high educated as the voters of Trzaskowski. While Trzaskowski voters are living mostly in the bigger city, are highly educated, speaking foreign languages, and so on and so forth. This division holds since maybe 10 years already, because if we consider the last presidential elections Agnieszka was talking about, the difference between then Trzaskowski and Andrzej Duda was exactly the same. And exactly the same part of voters were giving their votes for either one of or another candidates, which means the conservative ones living in the rural areas were mostly in favor of Andrzej Duda, now outgoing president, while the voters from bigger cities, which are better off, have a better economic situation, tend to vote for Trzaskowski. We have also some geographic differences, of course, historical ones. The west part of the country votes mainly for the liberal or left factions, while the old eastern part, where people used to live before the World War II, when Poland was under division, tend to vote for conservative politicians. And there are the divisions we observe actually since 20 years. It didn't have changed. And as we see, Trzaskowski was not able to convince the conservative voters to cast votes for him, which led to his failure, I would say.
Thanks to both. So it seems that voters in the last maybe 20 years had to choose between the right wing and the moderate party. In the last election, the presidential one, between a right-wing candidate and a moderate candidate, the platform's candidate. And so the political spectrum in Poland seems to be going from the far right to Prime Minister Donald Tusk liberal conservative party. So is there any room for the left and progressive forces in within this landscape?
There is the famous anecdote about the Bata, the shoes producer from Czech Republic. When the shoes producer from Czech Republic wanted to expand his business, he sent like 2 people to Africa, and one of them came back and said like, you know that we will never gonna sell any shoes in Africa because no one uses shoes there. And the other came and said like, oh my God, this is an amazing market. Like no one has a shoes yet. So you can say that for the left wing, if there is like only if people can choose only between like the far right And it will gonna change, I think, right now. I hope we will gonna say about that, because Karol Nawrocki also, some like the people who voted for Karol Nawrocki, these are not only Law and Justice voters, these are also far-right Confederacja voters. So if you can choose between like the far right and the liberal conservative, like can think that, oh my God, there is like lots of space for the left wing because this space is not occupied yet. The problem is that there is like good and bad news. The bad news is like when you have such a strong polarization like that, it ate like all of like the, you know, the political scene. So that's why the left wing is not so strong. But honestly, it's not typical only for Poland, I think. But on the other hand, like in this presidential election, we had like 3 candidates from the left wing, and 2 of them together, they had around 10%. And you can say like 10% for the left wing, if we had such a huge polarization, like such a huge turn to the right in a political scene, is not so bad. So yes, for the left wing, I'm sure, like I'm from the left wing organization, I'm sure there is a space, and there is a possibility to grow up, and there is a need, especially for the left wing to grown up. And I think this last election gave some good base. The biggest challenge is, of course, like the changings in society, which we can see when everyone when political scene is moving to the right. And what we could see even in this last election, and we can see that when the political scene is like moving to the right, the center is moving to the right. It means that that's why Donald Tusk, we say that he's like the liberal conservative, probably from abroad, he's like liberal. For me and for the left-wingers in Poland, he is a conservative. And we could see this in this last election, that also Rafał Trzaskowski, the Civic Platform candidate, he tried to fight for this right-wing conservative electorate, and he failed somehow. And these are the questions we can see like all over the world, that, you know, when the politicians try to like wear the masks, this populist masks, the right-wing masks, like to convince the right-wing voters or the conservative voters to vote on them, it usually doesn't work, because why they had to choose like this kind of fake right-wingers with like who they know that they are liberal, but they pretend that they are like much more conservatives, if they can just vote on the real right-wing, far right-wing conservatives. So this is also maybe the chance for the left wing, because the left wing, we're never gonna pretend that they are like right-wing conservatives.
Michał?
I find it very sad that actually the left is, had some little support in the Polish society, because it could, contribute very much to the public discourse. While it is exactly the situation Agnieszka mentioned, I wouldn't call Tusk neither a liberal anymore. He moved very much to the right, and we have also take into consideration that the far-right movement grew dramatically. I mean, the support of Federacja and of Grzegorz Braun, who is openly fascist and anti-Semite, is now about 20%, which is the top actually in the last years we see. The whole political landscape is about to radicalize even more, which unfortunately, in my opinion, will also lead to some radicalization of the left, as they have to find an identification and identify themselves, and maybe also make them visible and present some agenda which is contradictory to the right parties propose. I see the dilemma that given the fact that this whole landscape moves to the right, I'm quite sure that the task of the new president, Karol Nawrocki, will be to do everything to get rid of the Tusk government and then call maybe a snap elections, or wait until 2027 when the next are foreseen, and then to create a government which will be the Law and Justice Party in a coalition with far-right Confederacja as a junior partner. They just only wait actually to have this chance to govern. And the situation may be even worse than it used to be before 2023 when Tusk won the elections. So I'm very pessimistic in that sense.
If I can add something, because we just right now we finished the research which we have done in Krytyka Polityczna during the presidential election, like between the first and the second round, and just after the second round, the research is not finished yet. So you are probably one of the first people who will gonna hear what we find out. And the report is not published yet. So, but yeah, especially for Voxeurop, I can share this secret knowledge yet. That what was interesting for us was the question, like, okay, like the question about the Karol Nawrocki voters and about the right wing, what have changed or what is changing. And we can see right now, I've seen like the part of the research already, is that you know, that Karol Nawrocki, somehow the people who voted for on him, there were like the law and justice voters, as was mentioned, that it's like mostly, of course, it's like general, older, from like the smaller cities, not so good educated, but there's like around 72%, and there's like that 20%, 23, as I remember, percent people who voted. There are on Karol Nawrocki. These are the voters of Konfederacja, Brown. These are like the far right wing, liberal, libertarian, from bigger cities, younger men, mostly well educated. It means that what we will gonna have right now, like we're gonna have the situation when the president, he joined two right wing electorates. One is much more like traditional, the other is like much more libertarian, but Karol Nawrocki did it. So, and I'm sure that it will gonna change the landscape, this political landscape. It means that we will gonna have some kind of new right-wing composition right now. Very like interesting, and what is common, how it happened, like what is common for them, like they are all they talk a lot about like independent country, we know that, like, so like they are very skeptical when they talk about European Union, skeptical, or they just hate European Union. It's very like the, you know, conservative, patriotic, and this is something that is the glue that connected this different right-wing electorates. And if it's the glue, they will gonna try to, you know, focus on that, like to not to just hide, like to cover like the differences between them. It means those narrations will be much stronger, I think, right now.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Talking about Karol Nawrocki, is a former boxer, a football hooligan, but what more? And you mentioned who his supporters are, but do you see maybe any similarities with some other Eastern European countries' situation? Like I'm thinking of the latest Romanian election, for example. Do you see anything? Can you compare in any way with Călin Georgescu, for example, or others?
I think you can compare mostly, and it's interesting, like how often you can compare Polish election with US election. This is this kind of candidate which doesn't care, doesn't afraid. This is this kind of persona. And we could see this in the research, like the radical, strong radical, like the Donald Trump style. And this is something that people really appreciate, that yeah, he will gonna take care of our businesses in the world, in the European Union. So he will not gonna go on compromises. And this kind of strong political persona, we could see this, that in the research, that this is something that people likes, not only people who voted for like the Nawrocki, not only people who vote on law and justice, also like the liberal electorate, even like the left-wing electorate, like one of the candidates from the left wing was like the big guy, like really also independent, who talk like no one talks in Polish politics, Adrian Zandberg from Razem. So it will be also like something, I had a feeling that it will be also something new, this kind of radicalization in politics, radicalization through personas, through this like the strong, mostly men, or typically men.
Thank you, Agnieszka. And Michał, do you want to?
I don't know, I would maybe like to know more about your survey, but I think also there are many women who tend to vote for far-right politicians in Poland. It's not about, you know, the myth of young men frustrated who vote for Nawrocki or people who are being far-right. I think it's a whole phenomena we have to understand about younger voters. People in Western Europe tend to think that young voters in Poland are open-minded and they vote for liberal parties or left parties. Well, they are very much wrong. Young people under 25 vote mostly for far-right parties in Poland. And how is that possible? Well, the main driven factor is the economic one. Young people, they don't see any future ahead of them, economically, for example. Flats, as everywhere in Europe, apartments to rent or to buy are extremely expensive. The inflation in the last years also speeded up the rise of the prices of those apartments. Meanwhile, their salaries are very often about the minimum. So those group of voters, they don't neither believe Kaczynski as Tusk anymore. They try to find a third political group which has not been in their eyes compromised yet, which is now the far-right parties, which are now the far-right parties. We have to take also into the consideration they don't know any other reality that Poland is a member of the European Union. So a threat for them to go back to the state when Poland was not European Union is not a real existent one. They don't know what a border control means, for example. They don't know what goods European Union brought them because they were born in this reality already and they grew up. So they are going to take risks people who are older are not going to take, and they are also some way it's a fertile ground for these far-right promises, which are often contradictory, or they pose a threat of a poll exit, for example. I think this is the problem. And considering also that this group is becoming bigger and bigger, because most of the voters are those ones who were non-voters before, we will have exactly the reality in the future Agnieszka also described, which is about radicalization of the political landscape in Poland and becoming the far-right more meaningful and shifting the political landscape to the right corner, which exactly Nawrocki personalized as a president for whom those young people have voted mostly.
Yeah, thanks, Michał. It sounds pretty much like Italy and several, I guess, other European countries. Agnieszka earlier mentioned Donald Trump and the US. So we know that Poland is one of the most Atlantist countries in Europe, so the closer to the US, whatever the US administration is. Did the United States play any role in the electoral campaign or before, or did any other foreign country played any role? I'm of course thinking of Russia. Maybe Michał, for a change, you want to go first?
Yeah, just very briefly, maybe. There was a direct American impact, which was the visit of Nawrocki during the campaign in White House. Donald Trump hosted him in the Oval Office, which was also Oval Office. Am I mistaken? Was it Oval Office, Agnieszka, or was it just the White House? Okay, so it was Oval Office. So it was really an issue back then. And also showing that the politician is already very important by the fact that he was not, you know, an active politician before. Actually, he was chosen by Kaczynski because Kaczynski hoped for somebody who can be driven by him, like Duda was. But people around Nawrocki managed to get a visit in White House, and it was also very meaningful and showing how serious this politician is. When it comes to Russia, we don't have, at least I haven't heard about any scandals, any attempts to spread this disinformation, which was already during the campaign, but I think the sources were not identified. Moreover, there are some leads which says that, but this is something, a mystery which has not been cleared yet. The campaign of Trzaskowski was allegedly financed through some shady channels from Austria and Hungary, and maybe even the Party of Democrats, which sounds pretty contradictory, but this was also an issue during the campaign, presenting by the camp of Nawrocki that Trzaskowski's campaign was influenced from abroad, because 100,000 euros was spent on his campaign through these shady channels we don't know really much about. But no, we don't have any clear signs of Russia melding into the campaign.
I think that's even if there are not this kind of direct influence, of course, like we all know that what is good for Russia. For Russia is good when there is like the chaos. And the situation we have now in Poland, it really helps in that. But we haven't seen like this technical, like the formal influence. I'm sure there is a huge influence from the US, like as I said, this kind of influence in a meaning that like the inspiration, like the big inspiration that is even not political, but also some kind of pop culture. Like, this Nawrocki, the boxer, when he had the first event, there was this Rocky. We all know this amazing music from the Rocky. A very good movie, I recommend. So it's this is also, even if we think that it sounds stupid, but this is also the inspiration, like when inspiration in a way of thinking that you can imagine, because to convince people to vote on something, they need to imagine that this is possible. And Nawrocki and his team, they really showed people that this is possible, to choose the guy from like the nowhere, who wasn't in politics, who was a boxer, who was a hooligan, but like, he was young and so on. This is how they explained, like each of us when we were young, like fight it on the street, like even if it's not true, like so this is like this kind of story of this is like the story of like the everyman, and this is it wins also in this election, and it's also. I had a feeling this is some kind of like international inspiration when people are tired of this kind of old politics run by elites, like all the same people all the time, and especially when you think about U.S. election, like the same names all the time. So I think this is also important inspiration, which we which we shouldn't forget.
There's a question from Brigitte Rambosek. Brigitte is a member of the Association of European Journalists in Austria. And she's asking a question about the Polish media, the role of the Polish media. Are there some pronounced pro-European ones, and how about the influence for the far right on the media, I suppose?
I think it's similar than in maybe like everywhere, like the Polish media. What the first thing we need to remember, when we had like for 8 years Law and Justice in the government.
Thank you.
And they changed the public media into propaganda media, like directly. We had like an awful propaganda in the public media. So people stopped trusting to the public media. And the public media had changed after 2023 election, but it didn't, like, it's not like they started to be popular. They're like, no one has like any idea what to do with the public media. I think Donald Tusk would like to like just close them, maybe, or privatize them. Like, he doesn't care. Like, and years ago he said like that we have this tax you pay for the media, and Donald Tusk said like years ago that if you do not watch the media, you don't have to pay this tax. Like who cares? So we can see that public media are not important and this is. In my opinion, this is a huge mistake. This is like the huge mistake, because then you can have like the private media. Private media are like the private companies. They care about like, doing the businesses. And one of them are like very good. We have like the huge information television run by Warner Brothers. But, this is the business. If Warner decide to sell this, they will gonna sell this. And what happened after election, 2023 election, the private right-wing media started to grow up. And now they are very big. They based on like the journalists who lost job in this public media, this propaganda media. This is the landscape, like the weak public media, not very, like the really weak public media, private liberal, focused on business, and the private right wing focused on like really hardcore right wing narration, and also lots of social media. We cannot forget about this. Like the young people, like, come on, we know that, yeah, that they are not looking information in the television.
I have a slightly different opinion about this. I think public media are still important for Tusk and for his camp, because there was a huge operation of taking them over, and to do it also, let's say, half legally. It was not easy. And they have been given hundreds of thousands of millions of euros actually, to get journalists, and to give some new programs which should be different than the propaganda old ones. If somebody of you tracks, for example, how the public media looks in Hungary and knows that it's like propaganda in communism, then that has been exactly the media before Tusk won the elections in Poland. I mean, you had constant propaganda, only how bad the opposition is, and the government, how beautiful it is, that the Germans are again a threat, and we have to, and Tusk also is an agent of Germans because he speaks German, which he doesn't, but that's not important. That's why it was so important for Tusk to make a new media, which are not a propaganda apparatus as it used to be. Did he succeed with that? I wouldn't say that. I see journalists which they have opened their opinions on the liberal or the left liberal side, let's say, and it's not like a BBC, which should be, or even not ARD, which is the first German television program, which is quite more balanced than the Polish one. I mean, far much more balanced. But still, we have a very, very difficult media landscape. And I think that's it's deteriorating even. It's going worse and worse because with the ongoing polarization in the society and in politics, the media also becomes partisan. And they are not objective and balanced anymore. The attempt of taking over the biggest private channel, TVN, was so important for Kaczynski because they are on the left liberal side. And their news program was the most popular news program in the country. Channel has not been taken over by Kaczynski during his government only because the Americans interfered. And they said, no, we are not allow you to take it over because it's a business model we have and we care too much about our businesses abroad. Last thing is, the media were not that important during this campaign. There were many scandals revealed about Nawrocki, about what he did in the past. He was a bodyguard at the disco in the 90s or 2000s, and he was responsible for getting prostitutes to the guests, or about his shady business, about his flats. Media reported about that, but nobody really cared from the electorate of Nawrocki. It was on the contrary. The more the media revealed scandals about Nawrocki, the more support he got. Because you have to understand the political reality we are in Poland. People are divided into two camps, and none of the conservative readers is reading Gazeta Wyborcza, but only left liberal ones. And none of them are, for example, switching to TV Republika, which is the first most popular information channel now available. So people have two different realities, and they want to read the news they agree with. They don't want to have news they don't agree with. So it's extremely difficult to make a proper journalism in Poland now. And the last thing is, we have these surveys made. It's very clear that the young voters, young people, they do not take the information from media at all. They TikTok and Instagram, that's all. The less words, the better, pictures and videos, and this is where they get the information from.
Thanks, Michał. This sounds pretty much like, again, Italy, but also many other countries who are following that slope. I'm also thinking about France, for example. There's a commentary, additional commentary by Brigitte Ramposek with regards to what we were saying. Today, the Austrian Supreme Court decided that all households in Austria have to pay for ORF, the public television, even if they don't use it, but technically can. Because the Supreme Court decided that public broadcasting has an important role for society. Actually, it's the case in most European countries that taxpayers have to pay a tax for TV even if they are not watching it. So there's another question by the audience from Adrienne Burtin, one of Voxeurop's staff journalists. Would you say that Donald Tusk moving to the right on migration issues, like the temporary suspension of asylum rights, has helped the Law and Justice Party by validating their views on migration? So it's again about the shift to the right of the centrist politics. I don't know, maybe Agnieszka, you want to start?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, that Tusk moved to the right, but I think it started in 2015, I could say, in the moment when the refugee crisis in Southern Europe was such big, when whole Europe talked about migration, and there was the moment when, of course, Law and Justice talk awful thing about migrants, and then I think there was the first moment when I could see, what I could hear, that also the civic platform, they started, they were anti-migrants. So this is this kind of move to the right, because what we can see when we analyze politics, so when we do the research, it's like it's this kind of politics. We probably all know that this is this kind of politics which is not based on ideas. Like, it's not like, there was a famous interview with Donald Tusk when he said, like, if you have a vision, you should go to the doctor. Like, if you see some, maybe you see some weird things.
Psychiatrist, he said, I think.
Psychiatrist, yeah. So so this is not this kind of, probably for me, for like many people who really believe like in ideas, like the politics should look like that. You have an idea how the country should work, and then the politics is the tool to change this, to change the public sphere and so on. When politics is and somehow Law and Justice also do this. Somehow like the right, like this right, far right wingers, they had an idea. These are idea I don't like, but then but they had this idea, and then they choose the different tools, like the media, politics, like even their own NGOs, like the networks and so on, to implement this idea in the public in the public sphere and politics. And somehow the Donald Tusk years ago, he started to say like that, the ideas, like the visions, like we will never, we don't want to do the politics, like, and so on. And I had a feeling that he's like not thinking, he's not reading books about ideas, he's reading the pulse and check like what people like or don't like. And then follow this. But the politicians, they should create like the reality and influence the reality, not just answer on that. So, and that's why I think that they were gonna lose election for sure, like in 2 years, because of that. Because this is this kind of politics, and this is the same with the migrants. Poland is like really homogenic country, and or was for years. It changed, of course, when the war, it changed. I think the most when the war in Ukraine started, like 10 years ago. But still, like for years, it was homogenic countries. In this kind of situation, when when it's changing, and it will gonna change, the Poland will never be the same as it was like 20 years ago. Like the world is changing, like the people will gonna come here and live here, and also honestly we need this, because like everywhere in this Western world, like not so many children are born and so on, so the society is getting older, so we need migration, like and we need to build a society with those migrants, and we should learn the lessons from experience from Western world. Maybe do not repeat mistakes, maybe do something differently. You know, the politicians, like all of the mainstream politicians, like Law and Justice, Tusk, they were like, they could see that people are afraid. And if they are afraid, they decided, you know, to based on this fear.
Yeah, sounds like the classical
You know
populist
that, Gian-Paolo, yeah?
playbook. Micha, wanna jump on this?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I mean, there's lack of courage. The people, the politicians are not brave enough to present a different, opinion than the mainstream of the public opinion, let's say, or what they see in the polls. Meanwhile, we know that, politicians are the leaders who try to convince people to some ideas and not the other way around, which is now happening in Poland. So the whole politics which the government does is a very reactionary one. They do not propose anything new. And the whole campaign based on Trzaskowski, actually, and also the previous 2 years ago, you are forgetting about that, but it was the same case. It was also very reactionary. It was only a campaign based on the fact that we have to choose somebody else than Law and Justice and Kaczynski, who is destroying Europe and our country. But instead, there was no proposition for the voters which were coming from Tusk or his political camp, which, by the way, was a very different situation 2007 when we got elected for the first time and ruled for 8 years. That time, he made a huge campaign, went through the whole country with a bus, saying that when his party will be elected, people will become the second Ireland. Ireland at that time was very much speeding up when it comes to the economical factor. So people 3 years ago, 3 years before Poland joined the European Union, many of Poles went abroad also to work in Ireland. Tusk promised, if we get elected, we will get these people back. Of course, it didn't happen, but it was a slogan actually people could somebody finds familiar with. And also, given the fact that they had many families abroad, it was something which they could catch up with, which also brought Tusk a second chance to govern than 2011. Now we don't see any similarities in the campaign from the past. It's a very reactionary, as I said. They try to catch up and to react on what the far right or conservative politicians are doing. I will give you one example. 2 hours ago, there emerged a news that Tusk is going to temporarily close the borders with Germany and Lithuania, because a few days ago, a far-right movement went to do some civic controls there and to catch some illegal migrants, in their opinion, on their own. So in the panic, government, instead of doing, some law and order with those people, they said that they are now closing the borders temporarily, which is a capitulation, actually, and the failure. You have a strong government, and there are, a bunch of people from the far-right movement who are doing on their own. So we see also a significant drop in the election polls. Before it happened, actually, today also came one survey, according to which Law Party of Tusk, Civic Coalition, lost already 8% points, and Law and Justice Party is the most popular one. I think it's an ongoing trend, which will be difficult for Tusk to stop if he will not have a real plan and try to do its own agenda and not only to react on what the others are doing.
Thank you. Actually, Klaus-Jürgen Liedtke just posted in the chat the information you just mentioned about the control.
I'm just saying I didn't read it. It was,
No, I know you were writing it as you were talking. Just to mention that my Gian-Paolo posted many links of our latest articles on Poland about the elections, but not only an interview on the migrants, migration situations. So have a look. It's further up. I think around 2 o'clock or something. You have all the links of the articles. We do follow Poland, the Polish situation, closely. We have maybe another 5 minutes before we open the mics, and I don't know whether you can maybe stay until 25:02 or whether it's going to be too late. You will tell us. Because we still have a couple of questions. One of them is to to understand the specificity of the Polish political situation, do the Polish president have important prerogatives like the French one, for example? And how will he shape the direction, according to you, of this core European country, for example, as far as Europe is concerned? Or will there be like a Donald Trump kind of policy, Poland first, for example?
Well, the president as an institution in the Polish system does not have a strong position as in France, for example, though he has a stronger position than in a neighboring country in the region, like, for example, Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, and even Slovakia, where the president is directly elected. Now also in Czech Republic since a few years. But anyway, the most important tool he has is not to sign a law which was passed by the parliament, which is a very powerful tool, actually. Every law has to be signed by the president. And if not, the parliament can to withdraw the veto, the so-called veto of the president with a third-5 majority, which is very hard to get. And it was written into the constitution also to strengthen the position of the president in the 1990s in Poland while creating it. So I think this will be the main tool for Nawrocki, which was also, by the way, in the past, the main tool for Duda to make the life of the government harder and to trying to not pass all the reforms the government wanted and looking them bad, by the way, and lazy or not efficient enough. Meaning, for example, the judiciary reform, which was and still is an attempt by this government to bring the full independency, which was before the Kaczynski victory 2015. It's not possible because Duda vetoed all these bills or announced that he will veto those ones. So this will bring the government into a stalemate, into a trap. They will not be efficient to do anything because Nawrocki will likely veto all these bills, in my opinion at least, or try to find some compromises which will be very difficult for the government. We have to also keep in mind that the government consists of 3 political powers. One is the party of Tusk, second of the Marshall and, let's say, the agricultural party, PSL, and the third one is the left. And it's a very difficult coalition because everybody tries to bring its agenda. It's not possible. So I think Nawrocki will do everything to play on this tune, on this tone, to make this even much more difficult for them to cooperate. And hoping that the government will fail before the elections in 2027, he will do everything to strengthen the political camp and to become a godfather, a political godfather of this, let's say, far-right conservative political camp, which will bring him a bright future 10 years later, I guess, when he will get rid of his position. But I mean, this pure political fiction, I think, however, that will go in this direction.
Great, thank you, Michał. Agnieszka, do you want to also say something about the questions?
Yeah, no, like as Michał said, like the presidential position is not strong. The veto is the biggest thing that president has. But we need to remember that honestly, this government, after they formed, like at the end of 2023, I had the feeling that they waited for the presidential election. They repeated like, yeah, but we will not gonna prepare this law or this law because for sure the president from Law and Justice will not gonna sign this. So they waited for their own president. And that's why they lost also election. They waited, and people didn't want to wait. People were frustrated. People were disappointed. After like on the first anniversary of the election, we did in Krytyka Polityczna research, and it showed this directly that, that people are frustrated, people are disappointed, like you promised that there will be a big change, and it's not like that. So So somehow, yeah, so that's why the challenge for Donald Tusk is that, of course, this is difficult coalition. Each time when I talk about this, I try to count how many political parties there are in this government. There are 7 political parties, like in 3 or 4 different blocks, 7 political parties. Can you imagine to build the government that you have to give the minister to each of them, vice minister? So the government is huge, because each political party had to have like their own people there. Then you cannot decide anything because everyone wants to decide about everything. So the Minister of Education proposed something, then the Minister of Defense, right? No, I do not agree, like about some changings at school. Like this is not his job, but doesn't matter. Like, yeah, it's difficult to run this kind of government, but still, like this government should show that they had an idea, they proposed something, and President vetoed that. And it's, I had a feeling that for 1.5 years it didn't happen. Now they can repeat that we would like to do this and that, but for sure President Nawrocki will not gonna sign this. So, but do this, like, come on, like, please show the people that you have any ideas, that you prepared this. You know, if Nawrocki will gonna veto this, okay, but you cannot wait, like, for what they will gonna wait for the day they will gonna lose election, because it will happen if they will gonna each time repeat that we would like to do something, but you know, the president is like is against, so we will not even gonna start, like this is the best way to, they just, you know, just lose the election. And it's stupid. I don't like, honestly, I don't understand that. Just after presidential election, Tusk has an amazing speech. He just have like some kind of press conference, because he didn't have this government didn't have a press officer for 1.5 years. They didn't, like, because just Tusk, you know, tweeted and did some Instagram posts, like they didn't. Then they decided we need to have the press officer because we do so many amazing things and people don't know. So now we're gonna have the press officer, and the press officer we're gonna tell to the people, like this is, as you know, it's not true. Like it's bullshit, like that. So this is the first thing, and the first thing after the presidential election, Tusk said that we will gonna have this press officer, and second, also he said that, and now we will gonna work hard. So what you have done for 1.5 years, like, and you are surprised that you lost election? Like, this is the challenge, I think, that for now for this government, they need to show that they not only what they did, they need to show that they have an idea, that and they know how to manage, like manage how to run this country.
Yeah, thanks, Agnieszka. So I don't want to open the mics before asking you a question that is dear to me, and specifically, what impact may Nawrocki Poland First policy have on Poland's political and military support towards Ukraine? You know, Poland is part of the so-called Weimar Triangle, a diplomatic alliance with France and Germany that was created already in the early 90s to show Russia that Europe's central power were resolved, and lately, more recently, that they are still. So what about, to make it short, what about Ukraine?
Yeah, sure, very briefly. I think that that might be difficult actually to answer now. From what we saw until now is that there was an anti-Ukraine position Nawrocki took, speaking about the country being in the NATO and EU, and emphasizing that Poland needs our in the first place, which means that it can happen only through some compromise, political compromise, for the benefit of Poland. What he was thinking of, he didn't mention, we can only suspect that it might be a significant thing, as it was with the customs about the grain coming from Ukraine to Poland. And the farmers were very much against suspending the customs for the Ukrainian grain. But yeah, I think if anything will happen in this regard, he will be very cautious, and he will try to please the conservative electorate, which is very much anti-Ukrainian nowadays. But we see it also in polls, everywhere, in every sphere of the society. The sympathy towards Ukrainians dropped significantly, while 3 years ago, over 80%, even 85% supported the Ukrainians, and the state help for them now, I think, dropped to less than half. And the trend is going sadly in that direction. So I wouldn't expect anything good. I think he will have some impact also, maybe on the government to become more Ukraine critical. However, we have to keep in mind that it's also a question of security, and it's significant for Poland. I mean, no matter how it horribly sounds, to not extend the front line from Ukraine to Poland. So we have to support the country, and I think Nawrocki is aware of this.
What is the most dangerous is like the growing of anti-Ukrainian like the voices in the public sphere and in a public debate, and this is something we could see in as you know, we love to do the research in Krytyka Polityczna, and we also did this kind of like 2 or 3 years ago, that people in Poland, they are pro-Ukrainian, but pro-Ukraine, but they are but they do not want to support Ukrainians somehow, especially those who came to Poland. And this is based on like this kind of fake news and fake information in social media that, you know, they take place in at schools, in doctors and so on. So this kind of typical anti-migrants narration. So this is something that, unfortunately, it's not only what Karol Nawrocki will gonna put to this public debate, but also during the campaign, this was something that Rafał Trzaskowski repeated, like also talked. So it's yeah, this is the most sad thing. But for sure, like Poland will gonna support Ukraine and will be the pro-Ukrainian voice in the political international public debate.
Thanks everybody for attending and participating to this live event. And thank you so much, Agnieszka. Thank you, Michal, for being with us today. And many thanks again to our subscribers and our shareholders who made this possible.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, as I said, we will edit this talk, and you will soon receive a video of the best moments. We'll also post it, and you can warmly thanked in advance to share it on your networks, and keep posted for the next Voxeurop Live. We will send you an email, of course, be on the 15th of July on green finance, and we will then announce it in the forthcoming newsletter. There'll be another one in September.